Good afternoon, New York 14. My name is Daniel Bontius, and I'm with the Office of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Thank you so much for joining our Green New Deal Grants webinar. Just a couple notes of housekeeping before we get started today. Please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions. We'll prioritize questions from organizations in New York 14, so please mention the name of your organization and, if relevant, which neighborhood in the district you're active. Alternatively, you can email your questions to newyork14grants@mail.house.gov or call 718-662-5970, and our staff can support you over the phone with questions or with any technical difficulties. Our team will be monitoring the inbox and the phone. For today's webinar, we'll hear an introduction from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, followed by presentations by myself on our office's grants program, my colleague Grayson Flood about the Green New Deal Implementation Guide, and then Sonal Jessel from We Act for for Environmental Justice will give a presentation about their organization and the services that they will offer as the Region 2 TICTAC, and also more information about what a TICTAC is. She will then give an overview of some grants with upcoming deadlines, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A. Now, I would like to turn it over to Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Of course. Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. Oh, is my video on here? Just wanted to make sure. Okay.
I can see you.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. This is Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez here. Thank you all so much for joining this grants webinar that we have, and specifically our Green New Deal grants webinar that we've got going on here. One thing that is so important to us is that we have started this fight for a Green New Deal, and we've been encountering a lot of success recently in making sure that we are translating our tenets into law and critical aspects of the Green New Deal into law. And one of those huge moments of opportunity that we had, and one of the major successes, was in the passage of what is known as the Inflation Reduction Act last year. And while the title of it talks about inflation and it talks about other things, at the core, this legislation was really a major climate victory, where we were able to unlock billions of dollars in climate impact using this piece of legislation. And in that legislation, there are an enormous amount of community resources and grants in order to make sure that we address everything from environmental justice issues, community cleanups, energy innovation, job creation, and more. And since we have pushed so hard in making a Green New Deal, starting to make a Green New Deal reality, we also know that we have to work with grassroots organizers like yourself and community leaders who are on the ground every day to make sure that we get that money and those resources into your hands, into the hands of people who can create the largest amount of impact, because you all are in this fight and on the front line day to day. And it's always been a big belief to us that, and to me, that government works best when we have both legislators that are accountable to the people, working very closely with community leaders and grassroots leaders who are on the front lines in our district and in our beloved homes of the Bronx and Queens every single day. And so that's what this Green New Deal Grants webinar is all about. We want to make sure that we are getting this information to you all in how to apply, what to apply for. There are so many different grants and programs that are available. And historically, our community has been underserved in being clued in and keyed in to what money is out there, in getting advocacy support, getting, letters of support. And we've made a lot of progress. This year alone, we have issued record numbers of grant support letters, and we've actually already started receiving major grants to the district in order to advance a lot of environmental justice work. So I want to start off by saying thank you to everyone who is here on this call for all of the work that you do in our communities and the impact that you create for families day in and day out. And I'm just very excited to make sure that you all have this information. I believe this webinar is being recorded for reference as well, in case you need to share with any folks who may not be available right now, and we can share that information to them as well. I'd also like to personally thank Sonal Giselle with and We Act for Environmental Justice for being here today and sharing lots of crucial information with other members of our community, and for the support that you all give New Yorkers in serving their community overall. So thank you so much. And Daniel, should I hand it off to you, or do you want me to pop right into the tax credit piece?
Yeah, go ahead with the tax credit.
Okay. So with that, most of you here today are representatives from community organizations. And before we dive into the grants, because you all also interact so much with many of our constituents and our local residents, we also wanted to give you all information about some of the direct tax credits that are available right now, both to you and potentially your organization, but also information that you can share just to everyday people that you interact with. And these are also credits that you yourself can take advantage of starting now, your family, your friends, your community, your neighborhood. And we just wanted to share that really quickly as well, so that you have additional information on top of the grants information that you'll be receiving today. So without further ado, we just wanted to run through some of these larger tax credits from the IRA. For clean electric vehicles, if you're looking to switch over to an EV, there are up to $7,500 in tax credits for new EVs, or if you're buying a used EV, there's a $4,000 tax credit for that as well. For your overall households, there's a 30% credit on residential solar installations and a 30% credit on heat pumps, windows, and doors, that kind of energy efficiency upgrades that you can make to those. You will basically get a 30% rebate or credit, and it's essentially a major discount. A third of your price will be knocked off if you upgrade any households to any of these systems. For commercial buildings, we also have tax deductions for efficient cooling, ventilation, lighting, etc. And so those are the main tax credits that we have upcoming. There are also additional ones that we should be seeing coming out soon. And that could be everything from kitchen appliances to other kinds of retrofits for your buildings and your residences as well. Beyond that, I want to make sure that we recognize that these programs are sometimes inaccessible for renters and everyday New Yorkers, but our office is working to create some additional programs that are available to renters and make renewable energy and home improvements that are available to everybody. This also doesn't preclude landlord and landlord advocacy to take advantage of some of these credits, and making sure that that building owners can also make some of these enhancements, which can have major environmental and health positive impacts for people who live in buildings, especially older buildings. And the last program that I want to name that is also very relevant for many of your organizations is the commercial buildings deduction, which enables commercial building owners and lessees to receive tax deductions for installing more efficient heating, cooling, and general HVAC upgrades, as well as lighting. And so if you're a small business owner or an organization director who's eligible for these incentives, you can speak with our office to learn more about them. The benefit is about anywhere from 50 cents to $1 per square foot. So it's not insignificant. And depending on the increase in efficiency, the deduction over 4-year periods can be capped at $1 per square foot. So thank you again so much for joining us today. And I'll turn it back to Daniel to go over some of the general grants. Oh, I think you're muted, Daniel.
I'll get the hang of it eventually. Thanks so much for joining us. It was really great having you today. Yeah, well, thanks for coming, and we'll see you again later.
See ya. Thank you. Good luck.
Right. So next, I wanted to share some of the resources that our office can provide to your organizations outside, regardless of the grants that you're working on. So the first thing that I wanted to mention is our grants guide. I'm going to share the link here for you in the chat. We acknowledge that applying for federal grants can be daunting and complicated, but the office is here to help you navigate that process. And so, and that's whether you're a first-time applicant just going to the grants.gov portal, or a seasoned applicant who's looking for new funding opportunities or different types of support. Most of the resources in this guide are public and available to everyone, but it is important to emphasize that the work that our office does will relate to organizations based in New York 14, or projects that are taking place in New York 14 or serving New York 14 constituents. But a lot of this information is available from all members of Congress. So if you're here with us today from a different district and you need that support, you should feel empowered to reach out to your members of Congress and receive similar assistance. So the grants guide we recently published and could be viewed and downloaded on the website with the link that I shared in the chat. And this guide will hopefully take out some of the mystery and surprise from the process that can sometimes be overwhelming. By reviewing this guide, you'll learn useful tips and best practices from every stage of the grant application process and specific ways in which our office can assist you. So we're hoping this can be a starting point for organizations tackling these applications, and also general support and helpful reminders for folks who apply on a regular basis. In the guide, you'll find details on understanding grants, searching for grants, and applying for grants, as well as explanations about the work that different grant-making agencies do, among other topics, including a lot of the information that we're sharing here today. I also want to give strong encouragement to anyone searching for grants to set up alerts on grants.gov for the specific subjects or agencies that your organization is going to benefit from. Details on how to do this are in the guide, so we won't go through that today. We also have a previous webinar that goes into a little bit more detail about how to use grants.gov. Additionally, in addition to the guide itself, there are myriad other ways that our office can support your journey through the federal grants process. One of those is the grants newsletter. Many of you probably heard about this webinar through our newsletter, but if you found out a different way, please sign up on the website via the link that I'll share in the chat. We'll regularly share notifications about upcoming grant deadlines, future webinar registrations, and stories about grant awards in New York 14 and other grants related notices or tips. Generally, it'll be quarterly, but we've been doing it more often to start the year because there's just a lot going on, specifically with IRA and IIJA as well. Next is the grants webinars like this. This is our second one in a series that we're hoping to focus on the specifics of different grants areas within federal grants portfolios. So through these webinars, we'll bring experts to you like Sonal today to help with the nitty-gritty of these different programs. And even if you can't attend all of the future events, the recordings will be stored on our YouTube page. Just like the Congresswoman mentioned, this recording will go up there hopefully by the end of the week. And you can also view our previous webinar there right now as well. We also can help you with the grant opportunities search. I think that the grants.gov search and the alerts associated with that are really helpful, but sometimes you can't find anything. And if you want to make sure that you're not missing something, you should feel free to reach out to us. And we can liaise with the appropriate agencies or reach out to the Congressional Resource Service to be clear, give you a clear list of all the opportunities that might be appropriate for a single project. Additionally, we can do letters of support. You may or may not decide that one is necessary for your application, but sometimes they're helpful to beef up the application. We regularly write letters for organizations and projects in New York 14. We consider each of these letters on a case-by-case basis, but please reach out to us if you're in the process of applying for a grant and to see if a letter is possible. And they don't guarantee success, but they can be very helpful with your application. Additionally, we will help liaise with federal agencies. So during every stage, whether it's prior to the application, while you're waiting for the award to be chosen, and then also through the entire process of executing the award, there may be questions that come up that you have about that process. Whether it's an issue with registering with sam.gov, finding out if they received your submission, getting clarity on the status of the funds after you've won an award for your agency. We're well equipped to liaise with those agencies, any federal agencies, to get clarity for you on those questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us with whatever questions you have whenever they come up. And then finally, this list isn't exclusive of other support our office can offer, but finally on the what I'll mention today is that we can also help you track your grant applications. So the timeline of the application submissions and all the steps before your organization actually receives the funding can be a bit unpredictable sometimes. Right now, we're seeing delays in some agencies at every step of the grants process. So we're always happy to reach out to those agencies to get clarity for you on what's due, what the next step is, et cetera. So next, I want to hand it over to my colleague, Grayson Flood. He's a policy advisor in our DC office, expert on our Green New Deal legislation. And he is going to be talking to you about the GND implementation guide that our office created alongside Senator Markey's office. Go ahead and take it away, Gray.
Hey, everyone. So great to be here today. So as the Congresswoman was saying, at last Congress, we passed record-breaking investments in climate, environmental justice, green jobs, across a variety of sectors, and also in a variety of bills. So two of the main bills that include these Green New Deal provisions are the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. Both of these bills will help us to deliver on our Green New Deal goals moving forward. The IRA contains mostly tax incentives and rebates for clean energy projects and development, whereas IIJA contains mostly grants. So that's sort of two buckets and ways of thinking about these two different bills. That said, both bills across the two of them contain over 100 different programs that are going to be opening up at different stages throughout the next few years. So to help guide community stakeholders, from individuals to groups to local and state governments, this spring, our office, along with Senator Ed Markey, published the Green New Deal Implementation Guide, which I will link to here in the chat. The goal of this guide is to highlight funding opportunities from both of these bills that we believe align with the Green New Deal, and to make them more accessible to community groups on the ground and frontline groups doing the work. So next slide, please. Our goal is to update this implementation guide quarterly. So if you open it up now or later in the link I put in chat, you'll see that the first chapter in the guide is all upcoming deadlines for grants and credits, as well as new programs that are becoming available. Each program will be listed out with its name, the law that it was included in, the agency that's implementing it, the program description, and the deadline. This is sort of a preview of information that can be found more in depth later in the guide. So next slide, please. After that first deadline section, there's 12 chapters covering 12 different sectors of Green New Deal funding. So this includes everything from a chapter on clean energy, to one on resilience investments, to one on agriculture and food, to one on transportation and beyond. Within each funding opportunity, you'll find the name of the grant or the tax credit, the total funding amount, eligible recipients, so whether it's a nonprofit or a tribal government or a state government, et cetera, as well as information around deadlines and funding availability. Funding that is available at the time of the publication is highlighted in bright green. So again, we are updating this guide quarterly. The most recent version on our website was updated in August. And every time we update it, we will highlight the next quarter's worth of deadlines. We hope this can be a valuable resource to folks. If you ever have questions about what's included in the guide or feedback, please do reach out to our office, and we're happy to include those edits and answer any follow-up questions. So next slide, please. Moving on to the next section of our presentation here. In April 2023, the White House and the EPA announced 17 Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, or TICTACs, that will serve to provide technical assistance for community groups, nonprofits, and EJ organizations. The EJ TICTAC program is part of the federal interagency Thriving Communities Network, and it delivers on the President's Justice 40 initiative to ensure that 40% of the benefits of certain federal investments flow to disadvantaged and environmental justice communities. These new technical assistance centers will help ensure communities with EJ concerns can access President Biden's investments in America to address generational disinvestment. And with that, I want to pass it over. It's our honor here to have Sonal Jessel, Policy Director at our regional TICTAC, We Act for Environmental Justice, to talk more about the work they're doing and some of the grants that are available.
Thank you, Grayson. I'm happy to be here with you all, and thank you to Representative Ocasio-Cortez for having me here today to talk to New York 14 groups. So I am the Director of Policy at We Act for Environmental Justice. We are a community-based organization based in Harlem, and we have been around for about 35 years now, working on environmental justice and trying to build healthy communities, not only across New York City, but statewide and federally as well. And we got our start from direct action against the placement of a sewage treatment plant on the west side of Harlem that was spewing all sorts of really bad odors and some toxic air. And we had to sort of do some active work to help create a healthier West Harlem at the time, and have been doing this kind of work ever since. And so you can go to the next one, Daniel. And so like Grayson introduced, we were recently selected to be the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center for EPA Region 2, which covers all of New York City. And what we are tasked with doing is actually being a resource for organizations and even sort of local governments, municipalities across the region to connect people to federal grant opportunities, as well as also help connect with other grant opportunities that might exist on the city level, state level, even private financing as well, and really help groups, particularly in disadvantaged communities across the city and New Jersey and the rest of EPA Region 2, to really ensure that people are getting help with the sort of assistance that they need to apply for and actually get the grants. We know from our experience, as we've grown over the many years, and from working with a huge number of grassroots, community-based and smaller organizations, that technical assistance is a big barrier to getting a lot of the funding that people need to do projects in their community or really build up. So that's what we're here to help with. We are part of the TICTAC program that's across the United States. This is something that the EPA is doing across the country. There's 17 in total, and we represent one of the 17 for the area that covers all of New York City, including New Jersey. And then we also have a partnership with the folks that are serving Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands as well as part of EPA Region 2. So you can go to the next. So the main thing that we want to highlight is like the offerings. So we're here to provide service to everyone here that's listening. So you can contact our Technical Assistance Center and get help with the following things on this slide. The biggest thing that we want to emphasize is that we help with grant writing and fundraising. So we will help with identifying what federal grants might be good for a project you're trying to pursue, help with actually writing that. How do you navigate the portals? Sometimes the actual application portals can be very confusing. Understanding what kind of things that you need to have in your project proposal in order to be selected, how to do your budgeting, all sorts of these questions that often come up that can make it very hard to actually to be successful in applying for the grants. We're here to provide that technical assistance, and we have a number of partners that are on board and ready to help anybody that reaches out to us. We also will help with some of the other things that we have on this list, like helping with what is a needs assessment, how do you understand the kind of work that you need to get done in an area, how do you connect with different institutions or entities for a project? Say there's a grant that requires that you have a partnership with an academic institution, or requires that you have a partnership with some local agency. How do you go about building those kinds of partnerships, for example? So there's a lot of other help that we do, but really the main goal, like was said, is to get you money from all of the federal funding opportunities, as well as additional funding opportunities, so that the like unprecedented investments that we currently have on the federal level are actually getting to disadvantaged communities, environmental justice communities, and people that are serving people that are vulnerable and that need the funding the most. So for help, this is the contact information. I'll put this again, at the end of the slides as well. Simply email ejtictac@weact.org, explain what you're looking for help with, and then through that, we will connect you with that technical assistance. You can also go to the website, and there's actually a form on the website where you can write in what you're more detail about what you're looking to get help with. So please reach out anytime. We are around for about 5 years, as far as we know, and we're here to help you get grants and identify grants and get funding. Next slide. So just to highlight a couple of funding opportunities that are currently on our radar and are important to note. The ones that I'm going to highlight are not even really touching the surface of the different funding opportunities that currently exist. There are a lot of them, but I'm just going to highlight a few here. And then please know, if you're looking for a specific kind of funding that you don't hear about today, that's also something you can contact the TICTAC and ask, I'm doing a project in transportation and I don't know what federal funding opportunity might fit this, and someone can help you with that. So this first funding opportunity is a drinking water opportunity. So if you are in a municipality that has needs for improving drinking water, which is something that is definitely a problem across the US, including in New York, there is a grant open for that, for doing some sort of hardening against extreme weather work when it comes to your drinking waters and your public water system. So that's one grant that's currently open and closing in about a month and a half. Next slide. The other one that has a little bit more of a broad focus and can fit a lot of different funding needs is the Environmental and Climate Justice Community Change Grants. And this is one that is recently just opening. It's really meant to be for community-based organizations, local organizations that are partnering with whether it's an academic institution, whether it's a local government, like an agency, for example. You can partner and then be working on some kind of project around climate change and resiliency, air monitoring. So if you wanted to do a project around fixing an issue like on a waterfront, if you're on a waterfront area and seeing flooding happening in a certain area and you want to work on fixing that issue, that's something you could be applying for. Or if you want to be participating in certain advisory groups, this fund will actually give you the sort of funding you need to have a capacity in your organization to actually take part in advising governments on certain program build outs and being a part of sort of an advocacy process. So there's really a wide range of things you can do with this grant. It's quite a big pot of funding. It's $2 billion. Though it's the grants are going to sort of multi-million-dollar projects. Next one. The next one is Environmental Justice Thriving Community Grant Making Program. Again, this one is quite flexible and tends to work really well for a lot of different projects around, neighborhoods in New York City, particularly because they're really good for planning. So say there's like a community garden you want to put in a certain lot, or, there's a very specific local project that you have in mind. What you can actually do with this grant is have the funding you need to do an actual assessment, with an urban designer, engineer, or someone that can actually help you plan out how that project could work, how much might it cost, what are the different things that you need to actually sort of know how much you like, the different agencies that need to be involved in making that project happen. And so you can apply for a couple different kinds of sort of tiers of funding, whether you're in the planning stage, like I'm describing, or you're in the stage where you're actually ready to kind of put a project into place. It's ready to actually be built. You can apply for that as well. So this one works really well for things around clean air, clean water, local green spaces, things like that. So there's a lot of other environmental justice grants that are specifically targeted at members in New York 14 and a lot of other related areas. And you can find that on EPA. If you search like EPA environmental justice grants, it'll come up pretty easily into Google. But the link is also here as well. And there's a lot of them that are upcoming that I haven't talked about here. But again, you can always contact us and just ask us, you're wanting to do this project, is there a grant that fits? There's also the Department of Transportation, the Department of Energy also have a good number of opportunities as well. The Department of Transportation also is doing a lot of work around trying to sort of amend the historical issue that a lot of communities of color had, highways built through them. And so they're really trying to kind of do work to reconnect communities to some of the terminology that's being used. So the Department of Transportation also has a lot of great grants that I haven't highlighted today too. On the state funding side, there are a couple things to highlight. Moving away from the federal funding opportunities, there is the Bond Act, which is major for New York. This is something that you might have voted for on the November ballot just last in 2022. And it's $4.2 billion to go towards all sorts of programs across all of New York State to clean your air, clean your water, do infrastructure projects, build green jobs. And so right now the state is in a process where they're actually taking solicitations for projects. So if you have a specific project in your neighborhood, no matter how much detail you have about it or not at this point, you can actually submit it to the state so that the state, when they're evaluating all sorts of projects, they know what is top of mind for your community. And they do have a mandate to make sure that 35 to 40% of all the funding from the Bond Act goes towards disadvantaged communities, which includes, I think, pretty much every single part of New York 14. So there is a pot of money there for folks as well. And there's a good number of grants from the State Department of Environmental Conservation that are kind of come out on a rolling basis. A lot of them are currently closed, but you can continue to look for those as well. They do come out pretty much annually. The other state funding opportunities to be aware of is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. If you are looking for any kind of clean energy programs, whether you're looking for your business or your building or your home or your car or your, any kind of emissions reductions you're looking for across the board, NYSERDA is the place to go for some funding for that. And specifically, there is what was launched is these regional clean energy hub programs. And these clean energy hubs, actually just go back one, Daniel, still. These clean energy hubs are really important because their role is sort of like the Tic Tac, where it's led by organizations, and their role is to connect people and other entities in the different boroughs to clean energy opportunities. So if you have questions about any kind of clean energy work, whether it's in your home or your business or your workplace, there's specific entities you can contact for the different boroughs. So the information is here for Queens and the Bronx as well for those. And then NYSERDA has tons of other opportunities. One I'll highlight is a Clean Green Schools initiative. So this is really exciting for schools, particularly public schools, to get emissions reductions funding. And the important thing is that that usually leads to a lot of improvement in air quality, better heating and cooling in schools, better filtration in schools. And that is actually, all of that is linked to students actually having better educational outcomes. So it's very exciting that they have this program. And so you can be working with public schools in the neighborhood or encouraging them to sign up for this program as well. And then again, NYSERDA has a ton of other opportunities. They also are closely linked to a lot of the funding opportunities that utilities have. So both Con Edison and National Grid, which serve all of New York City, they often have a lot of programs that are connected to a lot of the NYSERDA programs on utility bill relief. So if there's affordability needs, if you are trying to do some upgrades in homes or in businesses, you can also receive various discounts in appliances or energy audits, things like that from the utilities as well. And often if you contact your regional clean energy hub, they also will be able to be pretty well versed in advising you on those opportunities as well. Next slide, thank you. So just the last slide, reiterating, this is a contact information. There's so many more opportunities that I did not mention today. If you have specific questions, looking for funding for specific projects, really anything under the sun, this is such an important time. This year is really a very great time to be contacting us, contacting the representative's office, getting help with how you actually get some of the funding that's coming down, because we really do want to make sure it's coming to the regions and the communities that you all represent, to make sure that the money gets to communities that haven't historically received enough in the past. So please contact us, any kinds of questions you have, any support that you need, especially on that grant writing, identifying grants, understanding budgets, all of that, we're here to help.
Thank you so much, Sonal. That was a ton of information. And so, for those of you who, were interested by some of the grants that Sonal just mentioned, if you missed any of it, please reach out to us or reach out to Sonal and we can give you more information on those. We're now going to move on to the Q&A. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're signed into the Zoom platform, please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions and mention what neighborhood your organization works in or what organization you're working with, so that we can prioritize questions for the work happening in our district. I think while we give folks a second to start putting their questions in, Sonal, I think a question that I think would be helpful for you to answer for folks is you're funded by the EPA, and there's a ton of EPA grants that are for community organizations and will benefit New York 14. But as you mentioned, there's also grants from the DOT, from the DOE, from all these other federal agencies. Are you only allowed to support on EPA projects? Are you only allowed to support on environmental projects? What's the breadth of the sort of support that you give when it comes to the types of projects and the types of grants?
Yeah, that's a great question, Daniel. So the way we generally describe it is that we support on federal funding projects around environment and climate. I think that's very broad. It can be a lot of different things. We also, to answer your question, it tends to be within the environment and climate buckets, but that also I think can be quite broad. Like things around housing can often be considered part of that bucket as well. There's a lot of intersection with different topic areas. So reach out to us. If we don't know how to help you, we'll tell you, but we probably can help as much as possible. But it is mostly focused on federal funding across all agencies. EPA, Department of Transportation, and Department of Energy tend to be the top ones. They just have the most funding for the climate related and environmental related work, but they're certainly not the end of the list. And then we also do say we are able to help with other buckets of funding, whether that's state, city, philanthropic, and private funding. That is something that we are also here to help with, though we may not be proactively, as often proactively identifying grants and advertising them. We can still help if someone has a question about those.
Yeah, and in addition to your organization, there are also other versions of this for other areas within the legislation. I know of an organization that's doing specifically this type of support on brownfields applications, and there's other things on other subjects as well. So it's really helpful to have organizations like these, because you can support these organizations from beginning to end. While our office has many other things that we work on, this is your entire focus, is to support in these grant applications. So it's really wonderful. Our first question from the listeners is from Julia at the Bronx River Alliance. She says that she was disappointed that the USDA Community Forestry Awards mostly went to governmental agencies. Will that be the usual result for IRA funding rather than funds going directly into disadvantaged communities? And should nonprofits try to apply through government partners rather than directly? I don't know if you want to speak to that first, Sonal. I have a couple of thoughts as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I can speak to that grant specifically, but overall, I think that there's a variety. Some of the grants are definitely targeted towards municipalities and local governments. And I think that's really simply because a lot of the work that needs to be done requires government to lead that, whether it's something that is a big infrastructure project, something that requires permitting, something that's happening on city or state-owned land, whatever that might be. So I think in a lot of scenarios, especially around like infrastructural resilience work, sort of anything that's based in, place-based projects, probably do require some level of local government partnership. I would say it's best to kind of create those partnerships, go after those grants, and try to sort of steer your agencies that you're targeting to apply with you or focus in your area as well. So it's a variety. Some are really just for nonprofit organizations, and it's pretty clear if you can just apply for that on your own. But a lot of them, when they come to like, if you're creating a new park, something like that, you will need local government to be involved.
Yeah, and I would just add that, so first of all, we, in addition to the stuff that I listed previously, our office also regularly will help groups advocate for projects to the city when the city is planning their citywide applications. So if there's a specific project that you think the city might be applying for, or the state for that matter, and you're also interested in applying for that, and you're worried you might be competing, feel free to talk to us, because we can help do that advocacy to the city or the state agencies that are applying. Additionally, I think some helpful background is that the legislation, it's built into the legislation that a lot of these grants are designed to serve disadvantaged communities, and so the agencies, their goal is to basically have the largest amount of money go to have the most effect in disadvantaged communities. And basically almost all of New York City is defined as disadvantaged communities. And so when the city applies for a grant that covers a whole borough or multiple projects around the city, it might sort of have more bang for its buck for the agency to pick them than one individual project. So, but also a lot of these grants are recurring. I can't speak specifically to this one, but they will come back next year for multiple years. And so this might not be the only opportunity. But for organizations in our district, you should reach out to us about any project you're working on, even if it's not for a letter of support, but just to ask sort of what the best way to go about it is, whether it's advocating to the city, applying yourself, et cetera. The next question is going to be from Evie Litwalk. She's with Witness to Mass Incarceration. And she asked, our focus is incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people. We're deeply concerned about the intersection between climate change and mass incarceration, which includes the ecology at Rikers, which should make it uninhabitable, as well as the danger of sheltering us in place during natural disasters and extreme weather. She says, is this too much of a stretch? And I think, I believe what you mean by that, Evie, is it too much of a stretch to qualify that sort of ask as a environmental grant application? My short answer to that is no. I think that if the details of the project that you're talking about are fit within the framework of the grant the notice, the grant notice, it doesn't really matter why you're doing it, as long as the actual project fits within that framework and it serves disadvantaged communities. And I think particularly when it comes to it being a danger for people to be sheltering there with extreme weather, that's squarely within the environmental justice framework. Obviously, Rikers Island and closing Rikers has its own whole set of complications with the history of that project. So, specific to that project, it's a little bit more complicated, but I don't think that type of work in general is too much of a stretch. Do you have any comment on that, Sonal?
No, I agree with that. I think that the issue you're identifying is very, very real. And so, yeah, I agree. I think that can certainly fall under the scope of like resiliency, extreme weather related projects. If there's, work in sort of like worker training possibilities, I know that's a big conversation when folks are talking about previously incarcerated people, in their sort of entry into a green workforce. So I think that there's a lot there. Yeah, I can't specifically speak to the Rikers side of it, but I think that topic certainly qualifies.
Great. Next is a question from Catherine Servino. Kat is from the Coastal Preservation Network in College Point. She says, on the East River and Flushing Bay coasts, we have many abandoned barges, piers, and vessels that have been littering our coast for decades. We also have a collapsed bulkhead along a public waterfront pathway that has led to debris on the adjacent coast and closure of the pathway itself. Can you tell me which grants might be applicable for these two initiatives? Sonal, I wonder if you know of anything off the top of your head. Kat, I believe that Noreen flagged something recently that had to do with the removal of the barges and things like that. So we can follow up with you about that, but I don't know, Sonal, if you know of anything about the debris from the collapsed bulkhead that's affecting the adjacent coast and the public path.
Yeah, I think like this is a perfect thing for you to reach out to the Technical Assistance Center, because the experts can probably point to multiple things and maybe even more targeted ones than the ones that come off of the top of my head. But I think the grant that I mentioned that has multiple planning phases, that's the Thriving Communities grant, could be a good one to get the project at least off the ground in terms of scoping or sort of documenting and getting an analysis done on the scope of the problem. Like, what are the costs of it? Where does the debris need to go? Like, all of these big questions. If you haven't yet done that, that could be a really good place to start, because then that helps you secure funding from whichever entity needs to do that work, and they can kind of know exactly what to be applying for. That also could be a good project for the Bond Act. It might be one to submit to the state. That could certainly fall under the categories of their resiliency and waterfront work under the Bond Act. So those are two that I've spoken out that come to mind. But I would also send this question through the Tic Tac email and probably get a couple more suggestions as well.
Great. The next question is from Brandon from ALIA. It's a nonprofit organization based in New York 14 in Parkchester. Brandon says, what are the best tips for coordinating with your office and other affiliated organizations around the mentioned grants, and specifically the Cross Bronx Expressway and Metro North infrastructure projects, which can fall under the scope of Albany? So for our office, both of those projects are projects that we are regularly communicating with the state about, with advocacy groups, et cetera. So you should feel free to reach out to us, Brandon. I'll put the contact email in the chat for everyone. And you can also go to our website. So you can, we can connect you with the staff on our team who are, working on those projects, and you can share your thoughts or get updates about the work that's happening there. But more broadly, to broaden the question a little bit, Sonal, in terms of maybe you could speak a little bit to the work that WeAct does with regards to connecting organizations with other, you had mentioned academic institutions, but I know that there's many grants where it requires sort of consortiums or things like that that get formed. Maybe there's an organization that's interested in it, but they don't have those connections to come together and do that. And then also where the best place to find these grants at the state level as well.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think with projects like Cross Bronx, I think some of those are like big projects that have a lot of people weighing in a lot of different directions. And, so I think that the connecting piece is really important, which is why you're asking me that, Daniel. So it's like very important key. And so what we can do in the TICTAC is connect with institutions or partners that we know are working on such projects. So you can be collaborating, or also be suggesting, like, this is the agency to talk to about this specific ask you have around the Cross Bronx, if you're, depending on which part of this whole behemoth of that issue that you're working on, as well as with MTA projects, if you're thinking about, depending on what you're thinking about, are you thinking about the buses or subways or bus lanes or, hedges along streets, and, there's a lot there. So then helping kind of advise you on, like, who are the right people to contact or the right agencies, and how to sort of start those conversations and find out if there is planning going on around something, and you can weigh in on something that's already happening as well, is really helpful. So we can do our best to do that as well, which is a very important piece of securing a lot of these funding opportunities.
Great. Another question is from David. He says, is there a grant facility to serve a geographically agnostic immigrant-centric outreach? The issue is that new immigrants are not easily absorbed into the job market, but to what degree is there a disposition to climate change initiatives that support new immigrants? We would love to discuss a project pilot for New York and other jurisdictions with immigrant influxes. So I think I was going to say, also follow up to the previous answer that Sonal just gave. A lot of the work that WeAct is set up to do, and that these TICTACs were formed to do, is work that our office does on a much smaller scale. WeAct is covering New York and New Jersey, but also that's their operation. And we, like I mentioned, we have obviously a lot of other work that our congressional office does. So when, for example, someone comes to us about the Cross Bronx Expressway, that's a project that expands outside of our district. We're very aware of the work that's happening in our district, the players in our district, but it's also important for those organizations that are working on things that are more citywide or borough-wide to be connected with the people outside of New York 14 as well, where I think that WeAct can help with that, and these other TICTACs that have a broader scope can help make those connections. When you have an idea, like something that David brought up, that might not be fleshed out yet, it might not be something that people are working on, this is specific to new immigrants and immigrant influxes in New York, but generally speaking, Sonal, I think that people can also go to your organization and say, this is something that my organization is interested in developing an idea, and you might have been flagged for other organizations that are doing similar work. And again, you can help make those connections, right? I think, David, I don't have something right now that is exactly what you're talking about. And when we speak to the legislation itself, that specific issue of immigrant influxes and the fact that climate change is that new immigrants generally are in communities that are affected heavily by climate change is not in the legislation itself. But again, the projects don't have, the purpose of the projects doesn't necessarily preclude them from getting the funding if the actual details of the project fit the framework of the grant. I don't know if you have anything to add, Sonal.
I think you mostly covered it. I think, like generally in terms of, around like worker training and work opportunities, obviously there's a lot of intricacies with the current influx of immigrants that is in flux. But in general, there are a lot of those opportunities. So I think like something we'd be able to do is say, like, here are all the different grants that might be offering worker training or are looking for people to sort of be a part of the green workforce. And, I think part of our job would be also like evaluating what populations can fit into that, because it's something that, I don't know off the top of my head specifically about this ask, but that's the kind of work we would try to do is kind of like take a little bit of a look and see like, where is there sort of an eligible project to work on that.
Great. So we're going to wrap up here. If you didn't get your question answered, please reach out to us. You can call our office, email the grants program, or go to the website. I also shared the specific page of the website with all of those grants resources. One question to close on, Sonal, is what types of projects have you seen most successful in dealing with environmental problems, weather issues that cause flooding? Obviously, with the more intense hurricanes that we've been seeing, we've been dealing with flooding on a lot more regular basis here in New York. I don't know if you have seen success in certain projects, either with getting funding or even success in preventing the effects of flooding. But do you have any recommendations for that person?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the funding from the IRA specifically is so new. It's hard to see projects that have been implemented and are working yet because a lot of them are in process. So that'll be my caveat. But I think a lot of projects that I've been hearing are getting funding. Just anecdotal conversations is a lot of those planning stages projects. So you want to do a bioswale, for example, is something that might help with, sort of taking in water on the ground to help prevent flooding in a building or sort of in a neighborhood. And then, having a getting funding to actually plan what that might look like. Those seem to be working really well right now, just because there's a lot of things at the beginning stages because the money is still quite new. So I think those have been really successful. And then certainly a lot of work on educational awareness, getting the word out about, how to protect yourself. I've seen some good funding coming around the extreme heat side on like protecting residents. That's also been pretty successful so far, but I know that there's a lot of interest in that really like local resiliency efforts, whether we're talking about extreme heat or whether we're talking about flooding as two of the big ones for New York, putting in, projects where you want to kind of figure out how you can like create these permeable pavements or put in more, trees and green spaces that helps with flooding. All of that tends to be pretty successful, but a lot of them are coming out in like the planning stages types grants versus actual project happening yet. But maybe in a couple of years, then we'll see everyone be moved to the next phase and get those projects done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Sonal, and thank you, We Act for Environmental Justice, for joining us today and for sharing all that helpful information, and also in advance for all the support that you're going to give to constituents in New York 14. Thank you to everybody who joined today, and also anybody who's listening to this recording in the future. I think this money that was set up by this legislation is great that it's there, but it doesn't do us any good if we don't actually get those programs and projects to happen in our district. So we need those applications to go in. And our office and Sonal's office will do everything we can to support that process and getting those awards. Our contact information is here. Sonal's contact information is in the chat. Thank you again, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you very much, everyone.